is a long This is SkyTour News for September 24th to the 30th. I'm Amanda Curran. September 28th, 1858. Donati's Comet is the first to be photographed. Donati's Comet is a long-period comet named after the Italian astronomer Giovanni Battista Donati, who first observed it on June 2, 1858. After the Great Comet of 1811, it was the most brilliant comet that appeared in the 19th century and was the first comet to be photographed. Donati first observed the comet on June 2 from the Florence Observatory. It was initially visible as a small nebula-like object of magnitude 7 near the head of Leo, and by mid-August it had brightened significantly to be visible to the naked eye. In September it passed Ursa Major and was nearest to Earth on October 10, 1858. During its apparition, the comet was particularly closely studied by the astronomer George Philip Bonds and his father William Cranch Bond. G.P. Bond incorporated these observations, and those of many other astronomers, into a monograph, an account of the Great Comet of 1858, which remains his most important scientific work, and for which he was awarded the Gold Medal of the Royal Astronomy Society, being the first American to receive the award. Donati's Comet was successfully photographed on September 27th by W. Usherwood, a portrait photographer at Welton-on-the-Hill in Surrey, using a 7-second exposure with an f2.4 portrait lens, the first time a comet had been photographed. Usherwood's photograph, which has not survived, showed the bright region around the comet's nucleus and part of the tail. G.P. Bond also successfully photographed the comet on September 28th at Harvard College Observatory, the first comet photographed through a telescope. September 30th, 1880. Henry Draper takes the first photograph of the Orion Nebula. The Orion Nebula, also known as Messier 42, is a diffuse nebula situated in the Milky Way, being south of Orion's belt in the constellation of Orion. It is one of the brightest nebulae and is visible to the naked eye in the night sky. The Orion Nebula is one of the most scrutinized and photographed objects in the night sky and is amongst the most intensely studied celestial features. The nebula has revealed much about the process of how stars and planetary nebulae are formed from collapsing clouds of dust and gas. Astronomers have directly observed protoplanetary disks, brown dwarfs, intense and turbulent motions of the gas, and photoionizing effects of the massive nearby stars in the nebula. The first discovery of the diffuse nebulous nature of the Orion Nebula is generally credited to French astronomer Nicolas Claude Fabre on November 26, 1610, when he made a record of observing it with a refracting telescope. The first published observation of the nebula was by the Jesuit mathematician and astronomer Johann Bastian Sast in his 1619 monograph of the comets, describing observations of the nebula that may date back to 1611. On September 30, 1880, Henry Draper used the new dry plate photographic process with an 11-inch refracting telescope to make a 51-minute exposure of the Orion Nebula, the first instance of astrophotography of a nebula in history. September 29, 1962. The launch of Alouette 1. Launched September 29, 1962, Alouette 1 was Canada's first satellite and the first satellite constructed by a country other than the Soviet Union or the United States. Alouette 1 was part of a joint U.S.-Canadian scientific program. Its purpose was to investigate the properties of the top of the ionosphere and the dependence of those properties on geological locations, season, and time of day. Alouette 1 was advanced for its time, and NASA initially doubted whether the available technology would be sufficient. Nevertheless, NASA was eager to collaborate with the international partners. NASA was convinced to participate by the prospect of obtaining data on the ionosphere, and Canada had the additional objective of developing its own space research program. Alouette 1 was launched into orbit around Earth and was placed in an almost circular orbit with an altitude of 613 miles and was used to study the ionosphere using over 700 different radio frequencies to investigate the properties from above. Alouette's mission lasted for 10 years before the satellite was deliberately switched off on September 30, 1972. The satellite remains in orbit, and in 1966, it was estimated that the Alouette 1 would remain in orbit for the next 1,000 years. This SkyTour News. I'm Amanda Curtis.